hot, sticky August morning in Westerly, Rhode Island in 2001. Michael Hoover sat in his home waiting for the McDonald's film crew to show up. Hoover was a 56-year-old casino pit boss who had just filed for bankruptcy. He had already contacted McDonald's about his winning game piece, a cool $1 million. And now a film crew from McDonald's was coming to shoot a commercial about him and his winnings. His face would be on televisions across the country. As he waited, he imagined all the things he was going to do with all of this great newfound cash. Finally, the doorbell rang, and he opened the door. There stood Amy Murray from McDonald's, along with a film crew and their cameras. As the cameras started rolling, Hoover tells all about how he found his winning game piece in the middle of a newly purchased People magazine. It was his lucky day. He said he'd fallen asleep on the beach, and when he woke up, his People magazine had fallen into the ocean, and so he went to a nearby grocery store and bought another one. Miraculously, cue the angels, the winning game piece was inside this newly purchased magazine. The thing is, though, Hoover didn't win anything, at least not fairly. His $1 million ticket was just the tip of the iceberg in a scheme that defrauded McDonald's out of millions of dollars. What Hoover didn't know was that the film crew comprised of undercover FBI agents, and that he was about to become the center of one of the biggest scams in U.S. history. Welcome to Beach House 34. I'm your host, Christine Worth, and today we hear part 2 of the McDonald's Monopoly scam. If you missed part 1, which is really important, it will be in the show notes. All right, let's quickly recap episode 1 of the McDonald's Monopoly fraud case. We met Jerome Jerry Jacobson. He was a former cop turned security expert who ended up overseeing the McDonald's Monopoly game pieces. Now, Jerry tested the waters. Early on, he swiped a $25,000 piece for his stepbrother. When that worked, he laid low for a while. But then he watched as his employer, Simon Marketing, rigged the game to keep the big prizes out of Canada so that only folks in the United States could win things like cars and $1 million in cash. When he saw this, he had a change of heart. He began to steal winning pieces, prizes for cars and smaller cash prizes, well, smaller than $1 million, along with various $1 million prizes. And one of these $1 million prizes he sent anonymously to St. Jude's Hospital. Then came the game changer, Jerry's chance meeting with Gennaro Colombo, a self-proclaimed mobster. The two of them hatched a plan that turned it from a one-man operation into a sophisticated distribution plan that had others turning in the winning game pieces while Jerry and Colombo took a cut. Now, after Colombo's death in an auto accident, Jerry found new partners, including Don Hart, Richard Courtier, and Andrew Glum. The scheme grew, roping in unlikely characters like Dwight Baker, a struggling Mormon real estate developer. By the year 2000, the scam had grown so large that it caught the FBI's attention. An anonymous tip about winners that had connections to each other led to the involvement of Special Agent Doug Mathews. Now, as we closed episode 1, the FBI's new Operation Final Answer was just getting started, with the FBI hot on the trail of this multi-million-dollar fraud that had been going on right under McDonald's nose. Now, let's dive into episode 2, where we'll uncover how this house of cards finally came tumbling down. In the FBI Jacksonville, Florida office, Special Agent Richard Dent had his hands full. He'd worked for the FBI for 13 years, and now on his desk were files upon files about the McDonald's Monopoly game, along with videos of the winners. None of this may have happened if it wasn't for an anonymous tip to the FBI. In the year 2000, someone called and said the game was rigged by someone known as Uncle Jerry, and this person that had called had said that these winners were fake. Uncle Jerry would steal the game pieces and pass them along through a network of people. These people would be given winning game pieces, including several $1 million game pieces, and had to pay a portion of the proceeds that McDonald's gave them to Uncle Jerry and then to others. And they would have to do this for years. Now, another piece of information from this anonymous tipster was that 3 of the $1 million prizes were all claimed by people who knew each other. Agent Dent contacted the McDonald's headquarters, and they in turn agreed to help. It was learned that the game pieces were produced by Simon Marketing and then printed by Dittler Brothers in Georgia. Then it came to the attention of the FBI that the man in charge of overseeing these game pieces was a man named Jerry Jacobson. So the FBI put a wiretap on Jerry's phone, and they soon discovered it wasn't just Jerry who was involved, but an entire network of people around the country. This was big, and the FBI needed to take action. Now, when you picture an FBI agent, you probably think, like I do, of some guy in a dark suit, this white shirt, a tie, he's clean cut, he's fit, very serious, and stoic. Special Agent Doug Mathews was none of these, and yet became one of the more unlikely heroes in the case. He had unconventional ideas, he had the energy of a teenager, and his colleagues described him as relentless, creative, and willing to try anything. A former agent who knew Mathews said, "Doug is one of the hardest working agents I've ever met in my life. Very creative. He'll do anything. He'll try anything, and he can talk forever. He is relentless." He was a young and inexperienced FBI agent, wanting to do so much more than what he had been assigned so far. In the Jacksonville, Florida office, there wasn't a lot of high risk or interesting cases that came across the desks there. But one day he stumbled upon the case that would define his early career. It all started when Mathews noticed the McDonald's Monopoly fraud case on Agent Dent's desk, Mathews' boss and mentor. Mathews was intrigued, and so he took the initiative to dig deeper. Mathews' excitement and eagerness to solve the case made him a key player in the investigation. Agent Mathews made the decision. They're going to meet with McDonald's executives, and he decided that what he would do is he would put on a flashy gold suit and wear this to the meeting. Now, as the investigation into the McDonald's Monopoly fraud case intensified, the FBI collaborated with McDonald's, and this became a crucial turning point. McDonald's made the decision to delay prize payouts until all of the suspicious winners could be identified by the FBI. Now, yeah, this was a gamble for sure. They knew that some customers would get upset who had believed they had won a huge prize legitimately. But it was something McDonald's had to do so that they could gather more evidence and catch the scammers that were stealing from the company. The FBI knew that they had to start with wiretapping other phones, but whose phones should they wiretap? They decided to focus on the main key suspects in the case, and 2 of them were Michael Hoover, a quote-unquote winner who had a $1 million game piece, and Gennaro Jerry Colombo, a key part of the network. Now, they didn't tap everyone's phones, just the ones that they knew could provide them with the most information. No sooner had McDonald's announced the delay in prize payouts did the scammers start to get nervous, quite literally setting off a panic. They had known the payouts were going to be quick, and now they weren't sure what to do. The only contacts they had were those that had set up the whole scheme in the first place. And since they weren't getting their money as quickly as they had hoped, what else would they do but make a phone call? You see, not only had the FBI wiretapped Jerry's phone, they had now wiretapped all of the people thought to be involved. And as the anxiety about the payouts hit the group of scammers, they began calling only those people who knew about the scam. The more they talked, the more the FBI had on tape. Since no one knew that their phones were tapped, the conversations were unguarded. They would talk about how they found their winning pieces, and they shared details on the payouts that they were getting from McDonald's, even joking about how they had cheated the company. Even the so-called mobster's phone was tapped, and in one call, he laughed about how he had given family members winning tickets and how much he was getting from the cut of each payout. With every phone conversation, the evidence began to pile up, and eventually, the FBI was able to determine that this fraud had been going on for years and involved dozens of people. So, and now that the FBI had a pretty good idea of who was involved in the scam and how it all worked, in the summer of 2001, they came up with a pretty clever and ingenious plan. Thanks to Special Agent Doug Mathews and his creative thinking, he came up with the idea to expose all of these scammers and to actually have the scammers incriminate themselves on video. So what Special Agent Mathews did was set up a fake production company. This company was filming a winner's reunion for McDonald's. One of the first to be filmed was Michael Hoover, a Florida man who said he'd found his $1 million game piece inside a People magazine. So the production company showed up at his door, interviewers and cameras ready. They walked into his home and had him sit in a chair and tell about his miraculous discovery of his winning piece. Cameras were rolling and he felt completely at ease. He truly thought that this was something for McDonald's to use in their TV spots. What Hoover and subsequently others didn't know was that as he sat and told his story, he was providing evidence against himself. Hoover stuck to his story. He was at the beach reading a People magazine. He had fallen asleep. When he woke up, the magazine had washed out into the ocean, and so he headed to a nearby store to purchase another one. Inside this new magazine was the winning game piece. He was convincing, that's for sure. He had probably told this story to himself so many times, he actually began to believe it. The FBI, though, picked up on some inconsistencies. Some of the things just didn't add up. As soon as the interview was done and the film crew left, Hoover picked up his phone. His tapped phone, remember, to make a call. He said to the person on the other line, they were here, they believed everything I told them about winning a ticket in a People magazine. One of the others on the list to be interviewed was someone by the name of Gloria Brown. Now, Gloria had been recruited by Gennaro Jerry Colombo, the mobster from Part 1, who subsequently died in a car accident. He had convinced Gloria to pose as a winner. Now, Gloria, she was a single mom from Jacksonville, Florida, and at the time she was 39 years old and not making near enough money to support her and her son. I'm sure that Colombo thought she'd be an easy target, someone desperate for money, especially because she wanted this better life for her and her child. So Colombo offered to sell Gloria a stolen $1 million winning game piece for $40,000. She didn't have this kind of money, but Colombo had a plan. He suggested that she remortgage her home, which she did. There had already been several winners in Jacksonville, and they didn't want the scheme to become even more suspicious. So he had Gloria travel with him, with Colombo, to South Carolina, where she would find her prize. Gloria was coached on what to say and had to use a fake address in South Carolina to avoid suspicion. Her story? She said that she had found the rare boardwalk game piece while cleaning out her car. As she stood in front of cameras with her winning game piece, she said, "I keep thinking that I've got to be interpreting this wrong. I would never have dreamed in a million years that this could happen to me." The agreement that she had with Colombo was that she had to pay him half of her annual prize payments from McDonald's. Now, McDonald's, they paid out the $1 million in $50,000 installments every year. This meant that she was left with $25,000 for herself. But she still had to pay taxes on this money, and not just the 25,000, but the entire 50,000. She couldn't say, "Hey, I gifted half of this to a friend." After taxes, she was left with $10,000. To make matters even worse, because she had remortgaged her home, her house payments had gone up over 200%. As each winner was interviewed, it became clear to the FBI that each story seemed to follow a pattern as to how they came into possession of the piece. It also became clear that they were coached as to what to say and how to act. In total, the FBI operation involved agents across the country, tracked 20,000 phone numbers, and recorded 235 telephone calls. Then it was time for the FBI to close in. The FBI knew that they had an airtight case against Uncle Jerry, as well as those he had worked with. So on August 21st, 2001, the FBI coordinated a series of raids across 6 states. Jerome, Uncle Jerry Jacobson, 58 years old, was arrested in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Andrew Glom, also 58, was arrested in Fort Lauderdale. Michael Hoover, 56, was arrested in Rhode Island. Dwight Baker, whose full name was Noah Baker, the Mormon real estate developer, along with his wife Linda, were both arrested in South Carolina. And this wasn't everyone. There were more arrests in Texas, another in South Carolina, and one in Indiana. Now, each of these people were charged with conspiracy to commit mail fraud. In total, the whole operation had cheated McDonald's customers out of $24 million. The trial began on September 10th, 2001 in Florida, just one day before the attacks on 9/11, which quickly overshadowed any other news story currently running. The trial revealed the staggering scope of the fraud. Jacobson confessed to stealing up to 60 winning game pieces over the years, charging between $45,000 and $50,000 for each one. This audacious scheme had allowed him to pocket at least $3 million for himself. When it was all said and done, Jerome Jerry Jacobson was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison. That's not all, though. He was ordered to pay back $12.5 million. As he stood before the judge, Jacobson, then 59 years old, spoke and said, "All I can tell you is I made the biggest mistake of my life." So what about the ticket that he gave to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital back in 1995? Well, Jacobson claimed that he had sent it anonymously in an unexpected act of kindness. Now, earlier in part 1, we had speculated that it might have been to show that he wasn't this big bad guy, right? He still had a heart. The investigators, however, had a different theory. They believed that it was a last-ditch attempt to offload a ticket that no one had paid him for. Now, you might be wondering about the rest of the crew. Well, it turns out that Jacobson was the only one to serve more than a year behind bars. The others got off relatively light, with sentences ranging from a year and a day to just probation. Take Andrew Glom, for instance. This is the former cocaine trafficker turned McDonald's game piece distributor. He was sentenced to a year and 1 day in prison. But here's where it gets interesting. Glom is still paying for his crimes, quite literally. To this day, he shells out $164.70 per month in restitution fees. Dwight Baker, the Mormon real estate developer, and his wife Linda, they were both sentenced to probation and are paying back their prize money at $50 a month. That's not all, however. Both Dwight and his wife were excommunicated from the Mormon church because of their involvement in the scandal. Now, Michael Hoover, he pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud. He was sentenced to 6 months of home detention and told that he would immediately repay all criminal penalties in full. He also received 3 years probation. Now, Uncle Jerry and his crew, they weren't the only ones who faced the legal system, though. Remember Simon Marketing, the company that Jerry worked for and that kept rerunning the computer system until it came back to a company in the United States? McDonald's filed a lawsuit against the company for not only fraud, but racketeering and a breach of contract, and sought up to $105 million in damages. Now, Simon Worldwide, which is the parent company of Simon Marketing, they filed a countersuit. In their suit, their charges were fraud, breach of contract, breach of licensing agreement, and defamation. They sought $1.9 billion with a B in damages. In the end, the McDonald's case against Simon was dismissed, and Simon received $16.6 million. Now, McDonald's public reputation, it also suffered afterwards, obviously. No one could trust who they hired or if their games in the future were even going to be fair. So to try and repair this damage, McDonald's gave away $25 million in prizes to random customers at its restaurants. Now, this time there were no Monopoly pieces involved. The first giveaway was $10 million, and this was to 55 random customers. And the second $15 million giveaway was in March of 2004. And the winners were determined by selecting a random time and restaurant. So whoever walked into the chosen restaurant at the specific time won the $1 million. Now, the Monopoly game was, for obvious reasons, suspended in 2001 when the fraud was discovered. They did reintroduce it in 2003 with enhanced security, and it did continue to run off and on in the United States until about 2016. Now, 18 other countries also had the game even after the fraud scandal in the United States. And yes, Canada was one of them, with the promotion containing several large prizes that they hadn't had access to before. In February of 2020, a documentary miniseries on HBO named McMillions debuted, which tells the whole story from 1989 until 2001. Now, lastly, who was the whistleblower that got this ball rolling? I mean, after all, had it not been for them, this may never have been detected. Well, no one knows for sure. However, there are 2 possibilities. The first theory was Lee Casano. Now, she had received a $100,000 game piece, but had a $50,000 tax debt. By telling the IRS and subsequently the FBI about the scam, she had hoped that her tax debt would be forgiven. So that's the first thought. The second theory was Ma Colombo, the mom of Gennaro Colombo, the mobster who originally had teamed up with Jerry. There's several reasons why she may have had an issue with her daughter-in-law, Robin. So after Colombo died in the car accident, in which Robin was driving, and we covered this in part 1, Ma Colombo, she wanted custody of her grandson. Now, Robin, it turns out, was in prison for theft and forgery. By telling the FBI about Robin's involvement in the scheme through Gennaro, her husband, by the way, Grandma had hoped to keep Robin out of the picture, keep her in jail, and get custody of her grandchild. So those are the two. And I believe the strongest theory and the strongest thought is that it was, in fact, Gennaro's mother who made this phone call. She seemed to know the most about who had what tickets, who was getting what money, and she would be the only one who knew that it was the close family members, right? And with that, that will do it for the McDonald's Monopoly fraud case. Check out the Beach House 34 website or the show notes where all of the links to the sources will be. Next week, you're going to hear about the chilling case of the Angels Landing cult. And this was led by a man who claimed that he was a centuries-old angel who had magical powers. He manipulated his followers in ways that will make your stomach turn. This episode, it's not for the faint of heart. Join me next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time as I go over the dark secrets of this cult and what ultimately happened. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you're not already subscribed, please do so by clicking subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. Thank you so much, and we will talk very, very soon. Bye for now.